I've encountered a psychologist who's also a nutritionist. And so I'm really excited to welcome Dr. Ellen, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit about your backstory, and you also have a wonderful website at smashthescale.com. Is that right?
Smashthescale.com,
Smash Your
right.
Scale. Okay, fantastic.
Well, Dan, first, thanks for having me here. It's terrific what you're doing, really trying to help people change their lifestyles so they can be healthy and happy. The reason that I found this path is basically I became a dietitian about 21 years ago. Pretty much had been struggling with eating issues and body image most of my life and thought, well, if I become a dietitian, it'll resolve all those issues if I understand everything. And actually, it kind of made it worse because it made me very conscious about everything I was eating and my body weight. And later on, I became a personal fitness trainer, really motivating people very much to change their bodies, but more from the perspective of wanting to look a certain way for a short-term fix rather than to feel fantastic and do it for good health and happiness.
Right.
So I became a psychologist actually 2 years ago because I realized that the diet industry and diets in general and sort of all this focus on weight loss and body image were really causing women a lot of harm because they would go on these short-term fixes and they would lose a little weight and they would gain it back, sort of be on this constant weight loss roller coaster. And I
Oh,
really
yeah.
wanted to offer them something else. So I started looking into psychology and how I could help them in that way.
Well, fascinating. So you went from nutrition and fitness into psychology because you saw that was really maybe what was lacking in a lot of the programs. So would maybe we can talk a little bit about some of for example, what would be the most typical obstacle that you see with your customers, your clients, and women in general, as far as successfully losing some body fat and getting healthier?
Well, the biggest obstacle is that people diet, and dieting causes a lot of problems. First of all, the minute you start to diet, you put yourself into starvation mode. And when you
Yes.
put yourself in starvation mode, you generate a lot of stress because your body is going, oh my God, I'm dying here. There's a famine. It doesn't know that you're looking to lose weight. Your subconscious mind is simply going, oh my God, I'm starving. So all you do is focus on weight. And research really shows that dieting both raises cortisol levels, so that's the
Yes.
fight or flight stress hormone,
Sure.
and it also raises your perception of stress. So you feel stressed out, you don't have any energy, you feel lousy, and also then you're so susceptible to temptation. If you're hungry all the time and you see that donut, what are you going to do? So the biggest obstacle I find for people who are looking to lose weight, ironically, is dieting.
Right, fantastic. Yeah, that's something I've certainly seen myself on three continents, and more so as the American lifestyle, American fast food seems to permeate the Western, well, and the Eastern world more and more, unfortunately. And let's talk about related to that, but some of the diet industry propaganda, and because it occurred to me. If we think about the business side of it, it's the only business where you continue to get growth despite a incredibly high failure rate, which is well documented at being well over 90% on with a number of studies. So what is your feeling about that? How do they keep this unsuccessful business, rather unsuccessful endeavor going and creating more and more money at the same time?
Well, you're right, Dan. It's a $61 billion business. And the reason it thrives is because it's self-perpetuating. So they want you to fail because if you fail, then what are you going to do? You're going to come back and try another diet. And the way the diet industry works is they really prey on what's called false hope syndrome. So they create these promises, the 30 pounds in 30 days, and have a rock star body or a beach body. They really give people this idea that, first of all, losing weight is quick, simple, and easy. And I know from your own journey, it's
Mm,
not quick, simple, and easy.
sure.
When I work with people, I tell people, give it a year, give it 6 months. Don't think about actually as weight as your goal. Think about it as an outcome focused on changing your habits. But what the diet industry does is they get you to focus on that short-term goal of losing weight, looking great, something, of course, that we want, but they lie to you. They tell you it's really easy. They have quick fix pills and diets, which they tell you are simple to follow. And of course, what happens is after you go on the diet or try the pill, it fails and you blame yourself. You don't blame the diet industry. You don't go, that pill's lying. You know, the things that Dr. Oz is saying on his show are incorrect. You say, well, there must be something wrong with me. So it creates this whole feeling of self-loathing. And of course, what do? You eat to comfort yourself. So it throws you right back into your old cycle of comfort eating, and you gain the weight back, you feel worse about yourself, and then you go and you look for another diet. So it goes on and on and on, and it's exactly what the diet industry wants.
It is kind of a merry-go-round, isn't it?
It's actually, collective insanity. As Einstein said, if you want to change something, you have to have a new way of thinking, which is why on Smash Your Scale, I'm helping people rewire their brains for weight loss. I'm helping them learn how to focus on decreasing stress, how to change their habits. Because you want to lose weight and look great, that type of what's called extrinsic or external motivation is important, but the intrinsic, the changing because it feels good, because you want to live a long, healthy life, is much more powerful. So if you want to lose weight and keep it off, you really need to change your brain. You need to take your time with it. You need to look at your obstacles. But of course, the diet industry isn't addressing all of that. And they're also not usually addressing things on a psychological level.
Sure.
They're giving you a diet, they're giving you a pill, they're giving you maybe some kind of device. And if you want to lose weight, you really have to take a look at your psychology and change who you are to a large extent.
Yeah, so important, so important. I'd like to delve into a little bit more on the intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, because
Sure.
because I think so many people, firstly, don't really know, outside of this field, don't really know what that is. Maybe we could give it a simple example, and then maybe talk a little bit about how you would maybe if we imagine a typical person comes to you. And when you started, you just met them, and maybe you're gonna meet with someone tomorrow. How would you use the intrinsic motivators?
Sure. Well, just to back up and define them. So the extrinsic motivators are, again, those things that come from outside of yourself. It's generally what we think about in terms of punishments and rewards. So when someone says, wow, you look fantastic, or you try on a smaller dress size, or, the doctor says, job well done, or the doctor actually kind of scares you because he says that you're going to have health problems. Those are all examples of things outside of yourself, external or extrinsic motivation. Those are great initially, and that's kind of what we think about when we start a weight loss program. And when you look at shows like The Biggest Loser, people have a very high level of extrinsic motivation because there's a lot of money at stake. Millions of people are looking at them, but the problem is that that's very short term.
Right.
Once a bunch of people compliment you or you win the contest, the weight generally comes back on, which is why you also need to really work on the intrinsic motivation. And the intrinsic motivation is what comes from inside of you. It's those motivators that give your life a sense of meaning and purpose. Things like, I want to live longer so I can see my grandkids, grow up. Or for me, one of my big intrinsic internal motivators to exercise is love. I exercise because I love my body. I exercise, particularly walking, because I love my husband and I want to walk with him and keep him healthy. I have a big fluffy dog and I want to keep her healthy. So I have all of these intrinsic motivators that get me walking. Plus, it's just enjoyable. And that's a big part of intrinsic motivation, is doing things because they feel good. To me, exercise feels good. I live in Vermont. It's beautiful here. And, I love being outside and walking and being out in nature. When I eat right not because, I want to look a certain way, and that's important to me, but really because I care about my body and I care about myself. And, thinking about it in terms of self-compassion, which is something that I teach on SmashYourScale.com. Self-compassion is about wanting to decrease your suffering and wanting to increase your happiness. And when you take good care of yourself, you're really increasing your happiness, decreasing your suffering in the present moment, and also your future self. So that's a
Sure.
big part of that intrinsic part of it. And it just doing things because it feels good to eat right, to get sleep, to decrease your stress, and to get exercise.
Yeah, so important. Now, speaking of feeling good, this is when I'm working with customers, a typical thing, or especially people that aren't customers, the hardest would be dealing with family or friends who want the quick fix. And many times, I'll make a suggestion to them, and perhaps they are having some issues with sugar addiction, and of course, and sometimes they're just not ready to. They're like, well, I'll do anything else, but I can't give up my sugar because my body needs it. And so when you're dealing with a food addiction or sugar addiction situation, do you have a game plan that you would normally use?
Sure. Well, I think first of all, it's really important to understand what your motivators are. So to make a list and think about, why do I want to give up sugar? I mean, you can take a look at the health benefits of giving up sugar. You can take a look at some of the psychological benefits. I mean, sugar really creates a huge mood swing. So you feel very energized, and then you get that crashing sense. Sugar really isn't very good for your health. So it's good to take a look at your motivators. And a lot of people also don't like to be addicted to a substance. So take a look at your motivators. And then also, what you need to do is to start trying to be a little bit more mindful, which means just paying attention to what you're doing while you're doing it. So when you feel that craving, whether it's for sugar or junk food or something else, think about what triggered that craving and see if you can pause for a moment. And the pausing really breaks that addiction cycle. So if you can pause, if you can see, what am I feeling right now? Why am I reaching for that sugar? What's the emotion and where is that in my body? If you can break the cycle, slow it down, you can really stop that addiction. Another thing that's really beneficial is also to replace it with something else. So, if you're feeling the need for sugar, is there something else enjoyable that you can do to reward yourself? Or even if there is something that you can eat to try to keep your blood sugar level more even. So if you can eat, for example, a piece of fruit when you're craving sugar instead of having, a sweet candy bar. And part of that too is also planning, making sure you have some snacks that are going to be satisfying but aren't going to give you that jump in sugar level. So it starts with, again, with the motivation, with being in tune with your feelings and your body and what it needs, and then also trying to find some substitutes for sugar, and also, really to question your own thinking when you say, I can't live without sugar, to ask yourself, is that really true? Can you be really sure that you can't live without sugar? And when you have that thought, I can't live without sugar, how does it make you feel? Of course, it makes you feel like you need it. And then ask yourself, who would I be if I let go of that thought? And
Oh,
realizing that
that's
we
yeah.
don't need to believe our thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great point. Who would I be if I let go of that?
Right.
That's one I've not heard before. I think that's wonderfully said. So with to change gears a little bit, what about some of the other issues that sometimes go along with that? For example, do you see, like, one of the things that I see a lot is people that are just on the go so much that they're cutting their sleep back. They're only sleeping 6 hours, and they may really need 7, 8, or 9 hours. And it's almost like in American society, we almost give ourselves a medal for being sleep deprived, as if it's glorious. Is that something you run into, and how do you deal with that?
Sure. Well, most people really are sleep deprived because it's a combination of there's always something to do. And another issue, too, is that we have access to media 24/7. So there's always
Yes.
something to watch. There's always an email to answer. I know with myself working on social media for SmashYourScale.com, there is always more than I can be doing. So we have this sort of constant stress and pressure to be going, to be doing all the time. And we're not a society that really emphasizes and encourages people to slow down. And sleep has a very important physiological purpose. When we sleep, that's when our body regenerates. And there's been a tremendous body of research that's really started to look at sleep and weight loss. And research really shows that if you don't sleep enough, you're putting yourself at a much higher risk of obesity, of having problems with your eating. And there's a physiological reason for that. When we sleep, we generate certain appetite suppressing hormones. So if you're not getting enough sleep, you're not putting the brakes on your appetite. Also, when we don't get enough sleep, we get tired, and sometimes we mix our tired signals up with our I need to eat signals.
Yes.
So, on top of that, we're drinking a lot of caffeine to keep us going, and we're just not being in touch with our body. So, one of the biggest issues I work with people is working on this idea of self-care. You
Yes.
can't work on your eating habits if you don't start with some basic self-care, making sure you get enough rest, making sure you get enough sleep, making sure you take time to do things to relax and enjoy your life. So you got to slow it down and think about what it is I really need right now. And unfortunately, what people usually grab is food. So maybe they need a hug, or maybe they,
Yes.
want to sit and relax with a good book, or do some meditation or yoga, or take a walk. But the first thing we often think about when we're feeling kind of stressed and agitated is, I'll reach for that candy bar. And certainly it gives us a short-term boost in mood. I mean, sugar and fat definitely work on our brains. They increase levels of the neurotransmitter dopamine,
Yes.
and they increase our endorphins. So we feel good, but then after the fact, our blood sugar comes down, we don't feel so good, and then we sort of have this extra, arrow where we feel bad about ourselves because we cheated on our diet. So that issue of sleep is really important. The issue of self-care is important. Often before I start to work with people, I work a lot with what's called intuitive eating, which
Yes.
means listening to what your body wants and what it needs. But before you can get that point of listening to your body, you really need to work on these basic self-care issues like getting enough rest. So that's a big goal for a tremendous number of my clients. We just work on the specific habits that they need to make in order to go to sleep, which means turning off the screens at like 9 o'clock, maybe having a ritual where you have a cup of tea in the evening, making sure lights out or is like 11 o'clock, and really taking specific actions so that you can get a good night of rest.
Yeah. Oh, that's so important. And how about if we talk a little bit? Let's talk a little about why it's so important to turn the screens off, because I think a lot of people don't really understand how the circadian rhythms affect our hormones and affect our sleep cycles, melatonin, and other things. Could you expand on that a bit?
Sure. Well, the light and the energy that we get when we are in front of a screen definitely plays with our circadian rhythms and our melatonin. The melatonin, is a hormone that's produced as it gets dark. So when we live in a world with a tremendous amount of artificial light, we're not naturally producing those chemicals. So if you want to get a good night's rest, you really should not only turn off the screens, but actually dim your lights and create an environment where your body can actually prepare to rest. Because it all goes back to the way that people evolved. I mean, certainly we evolved before there was electricity,
Oh, yeah.
and people, would go to bed when it got dark, and they would wake up when it was light again. So it's great to try to get your body back into a natural rhythm and try to go to bed at the same time every day, wake up at the same time, turn off the screens, do things that are relaxing. And of course, looking at screens can be very agitating. And they've even done studies where that sort of ping of the computer telling you, you've got email really sends your blood pressure up. So
Oh, yeah.
it creates, this anxiety, this tension. Even if you can be watching something on television too that's violent or really intense, and that can make it very difficult for you to fall asleep at night.
Right. That brings to mind a study that I saw recently that it involved the idea of seeing human faces, and that being something that's very stimulating and maybe confusing to our brain to see a lot of different faces at night. And conversely, that it's actually positive to see a lot of faces in the morning. Maybe that's a good reason to get out and get out and about if you're working for people that are working in a home office. But and of course if you turn on the TV, you're gonna see a lot of faces,
Right.
and that's gonna also probably, I think they showed a correlation with an increase of adrenaline, and even without looking at the emotion of the violence or anything that might have been going on.
Interesting study.
Yeah. I think I heard about that on a podcast, but and I don't have it. I don't have the reference in front of me, But anyway, another let's look at something slightly different if we can. How do you deal with, for example, if you have sometimes you might have someone who's on antidepressant medication, and that may be causing them to have a lot of weight gain, or especially water retention, fluid retention, and then that's obviously not something we're going to tell someone to go off their medication. But do you have any tips that that would be helpful?
Sure. Well, I think that the most helpful thing, I mean, part of it is changes in appetite. So I think one of the key things, whether you're on medication or off, is really to sit down and do some planning, making sure that you're doing the self-care, that you're also taking time for your meals. I mean, mindful eating is really a key part of losing weight. And what mindful eating is sitting down and doing nothing else but eat. So a lot of times people are just grabbing food here and there. They're not listening to their appetites. So if you're on an antidepressant, it's really important that you take the time to take really good care of yourself, both your physiological health and also for your mental health. So to really take the time to do some food shopping, to do meal planning, to prepare and enjoy healthy meals. And really, the more healthy your diet is, the better your diet is, the better it's going to be for your mental health. I mean, there's a lot of research around things like omega-3 fatty acids in terms of brain health. There are certain supplements that also can help you boost your brain health. But really, it comes down to food first. So making sure that you're eating lots of plant foods, that you're getting lots of nuts and seeds and fish, which have the omega-3s, and really taking time to care for yourself. And, there's something too to talk about with either if you're seeing a therapist or with your physician, really discuss the weight gain, really understand what are the kind of things that trigger you to eat more high caloric foods, and see if you can work on some ways to really cut down on that.
Right. Yeah. So very, very important. And speaking of that, I had an interview a few weeks ago with a psychiatrist out in the Pacific Northwest, Dr. Ann Childers, and she was telling me she had had a lot of patients that were that with a B12 deficiency. She was seeing psychological problems that were resolved just by getting that B12 level up. And I found that was pretty interesting. Is that something that's well known in psychology or psychiatry? I know that's not exactly your.
I think we're really starting to scratch the surface. I think that particularly in really Western medicine tends to look at a problem and look at a cure. So, or look at a pill or something quick you can do to solve it. And when you start looking at the relationship between your nutrition status and your brain health, that takes a lot more digging. And one thing that's really interesting is the literature that's coming out around gluten and brain health. So they're finding sometimes people with mental illness such as schizophrenia, or people who are having seizure disorders, epilepsy, sometimes when they change their diet, it goes away completely. So, we think about our gut and instincts. Our gut is literally connected to our brain. We have nerves that are connected.
Is it the vagus nerve?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So gut health, and I say in my own case, I just actually had to give up gluten, and it actually has improved my mood. So my gut had been bothering me for a while, and I finally figured out what the problem was, and giving up gluten for me was something that actually made a huge difference in both my physiological as well as my mental health.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. On that same theme, what about ADHD? Have you seen a relationship with food, ADHD?
Certainly, there's a lot of literature. It's not something I work with as much, but certainly a lot of the chemicals, processed food. There seems to be a relationship between sort of the SAD diet, the standard American diet, and problems like ADHD. Certainly, too, when people have ADHD, they often feel bad about themselves, and some people might turn to food as a crutch. Yes. To feel better, temporarily, not so much about themselves, but just as a way to comfort themselves, because it is a really big problem, particularly in our society that's always emphasizing so much stimulation, everybody moving so fast as we were talking about before. So I think, for everybody, having a balanced diet, which is really eating more whole foods that maintain really a steady blood sugar, having more plant foods, really cutting down on the processed food, cutting down on the sugar and the caffeine. Overall, that's going to have a beneficial effect on your brain health, on your mental outlook, as well as on your weight and, on how well your body feels and functions.
By all means, fantastic. Well, this is I know we're coming up on time here, and just to finish up with one last question, and then I'll ask you to tell people again, how they can find you if they want to find out more about your program. But before we get to that, if you could go back in time, I know you mentioned, or maybe I saw it on your blog. You went through some struggles yourself many years ago. If you could go back in time to whenever that was, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and give yourself two messages in the past, what would it be?
Wow. I would say to love yourself and your body and just accept things the way that they are. I know myself, particularly when I was a personal fitness trainer, I would just beat myself up about my body all the time. And my body, I'm in great shape now at 51, but
You're
in my
51.
40s,
I guess you look
yeah.
much younger. So
Oh, thank you.
congratulations.
All that good eating. But,
A little
in my
extrinsic.
40s, I had that, what we were talking about earlier about that extrinsic motivation, particularly when you're a personal fitness trainer and people are coming to you because
Sure.
you look a certain way. But I would just feel bad about my body all the time, which when I look at my younger self, it's very strange to me because I think my body's fantastic now. I rock climb and I do yoga and I run and I lift weights and, I'm active all the time and my body functionally is great. I love the way it looks. But back then, body image really is all in your mind. And I had a very skewed image of my body. I was very restrictive with my eating. And I'm sad that I put so much energy into this issue. But a lot of times when people are really fixated on their bodies, sometimes it's because they don't want to focus on what's really important in their life. So if people, I think part of this was becoming a psychologist and getting some therapy myself and really learning to appreciate my imperfections and all of myself. And I think that sometimes when you focus on that external, your body and how it looks and every single thing that you're eating, that takes so much time and energy away from what's truly important in life. But it can be a distraction for people. So when people have eating disorders or body image issues, often it's because they're distracting themselves for some deeper issues that they don't want to work on. So my biggest thing I would say to myself is just love and appreciate yourself, wrinkles and warts and all, and really enjoy this moment because really now is the only time that we have.
Yes, so great words of wisdom. So, Dr. Ellen, thank you so much. This has been this is fun, informative, insightful, and I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this or listening to this, because this will be on iTunes as an audio podcast as well as a video podcast in January. We're launching the whole show, and before that, we'll be putting things up on YouTube as well. So for people that want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to find you?
The best way to find me is to go to SmashYourScale.com. That's SmashYourScale.com. And what I do on Smash Your Scale is I provide live coaching and counseling. So I'm a psychologist, registered dietitian, and licensed wellness coach. And what I really want to do is, for a very affordable rate, I hold group sessions and single sessions where people can talk to me. They can tell me about their problems. And what's really interesting is when we have groups, everybody seems to have the same issues and problems, and you realize that you're not alone. So on Smash Your Scale, through membership or buying individual classes, they can join me and I can really help you be healthy and get to a weight that feels right for you. You can also follow me on Twitter, which is, I think, how we met, and I'm at R. Albertson. And also I'm on Facebook at Smash Your Scale. So I'd love to get in touch with you and help you with your journey. And I think that when you really decide to change your weight, it really can be a great catalyst to change your life and really take a look at, how have I been using food and how do I really want to care for myself? We didn't touch too much on self-compassion, but there's this whole deep idea about treating yourself the way that you would a good friend. So treating yourself with kindness instead of being judgmental, really understanding that everybody goes through things. You're not alone, and really learning to be more mindful, be more present in your life so you really can enjoy all that life has to offer.
I love that. Treat yourself as you would a good friend. That's a great way to sum this up, and maybe could be a great thing to talk about in a future interview. So we'd love to have you back sometime in the future. And one last thing. What about your future? What about your book?
Oh, yes. I'm currently working on a book called Rewire Your Brain. It's Master Scale Rewire Your Brain for Weight Loss. So really to focus on the psychological ways to change your brain, which will enable you to get to a weight that's right for you.
Okay, great. I didn't know that. I was fishing there, but obviously you've got enough great information for a book. So fantastic. Look forward to hearing more about that in the future. Thank you again for being on the show, and we'll be in contact on Twitter and online.
Thanks, Dan. Pleasure being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Bye-bye.
it.